On a freezing winter night in Manhattan, billionaire CEO Alexandra Voss swept into the city's most exclusive restaurant with the precision of a woman who had conquered boardrooms and crushed competitors without breaking a sweat. Her 6-year-old son Henry walked beside her, his small hand lost in her perfectly manicured grip, his eyes darting nervously at the flash of cameras outside. Lumiere was the kind of establishment where reservations were traded like currency and a single table could seal a merger worth billions. Alexandra had chosen it deliberately not for the food, but for the optics. Tonight was about image. Tonight was about showing the world that the Ice Queen of Wall Street was also a devoted mother. But as she guided Henry toward their reserved VIP table, the boy suddenly stopped. His gaze had found something across the dining room, something that made his breath catch. In a quiet corner, a tired-looking man in a worn jacket was carefully cutting spaghetti into small pieces for a giggling 7-year-old girl. The man blew on each forkful before offering it to her, and the child laughed with pure, uncomplicated joy. Henry tugged at his mother's hand. His voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, I want to sit with them." Alexandra looked down at her son, ready to dismiss the request as childish nonsense. But something in his eyes made her pause. It was longing. It was hunger. Not for food, but for something she had never learned to give him. The winter wind howled outside Lumiere's frosted windows, carrying with it the promise of snow. Inside the restaurant glowed with the warm amber light of crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across tables draped in pristine white linen. The air smelled of truffle oil and aged wine, of money and privilege, and the careful choreography of the elite. Waiters in impeccable black vests moved between tables like shadows, their faces trained into expressions of polite deference. This was a temple of excess, a place where the powerful came to see and be seen, where deals were made over dessert, and reputations could be destroyed with a single whispered rumor. Alexandra Voss belonged here. At 33, she had built Voss Capital from a small fintech startup into a financial empire that made headlines and crushed competitors with equal regularity. The press called her the Ice Queen of Wall Street, a title she had never bothered to reject. In her world, warmth was weakness. Emotion was a vulnerability that enemies would exploit. She had learned these lessons the hard way through a failed marriage to a man who had tried to steal her company, through investors who had smiled to her face while plotting behind her back. Now she trusted no one. Now she controlled everything. Except perhaps the small boy standing beside her. Henry Voss was 6 years old, with his mother's sharp blue eyes and his absent father's quiet disposition. He wore a miniature cashmere coat and shoes that cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. But beneath the expensive clothes, he was just a child who had learned to be invisible. He knew not to speak when his mother was on the phone. He knew not to ask for bedtime stories when she was reviewing quarterly reports. He knew with the terrible clarity of children who grow up too fast that his mother loved him in her own way, but that her way was made of distance and delegation, and the endless, exhausting performance of success. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be their special dinner, just the two of them. But Henry could already see his mother's eyes scanning the room, cataloging faces, calculating alliances. He could feel the tension in her grip, the way she walked like she was marching into battle rather than settling down for a meal with her son. Across the restaurant, in a corner table that the hostess had assigned with barely concealed disdain, Elias Hayes was teaching his daughter the proper way to twirl spaghetti on a fork. He was 36 years old, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that told the story of a life spent working. His shirt was clean but faded at the collar, his jacket patched at the elbows. He looked profoundly out of place in Lumiere's gilded splendor, and he knew it. But tonight was not about him. Tonight was about Audrey. His 7-year-old daughter had brought home a report card covered in gold stars, and Elias had promised her the fanciest dinner she could imagine. He had saved for 3 weeks, picking up extra shifts at the warehouse, fixing cars on the side, tutoring neighborhood kids in math. The bill tonight would hurt. It would hurt badly. But the look on Audrey's face when she had walked through Lumiere's doors, her eyes wide as saucers, her mouth forming a perfect O of wonder, that look was worth every penny he would never see again. Audrey Hayes was a force of nature contained in a small body. She had her father's dark hair and her late mother's infectious laugh, a laugh that rang out now as Elias pretended to struggle with his own spaghetti, tangling it deliberately around his fork until it looked like a yarn explosion. She reached over to help him, her small fingers surprisingly deft, and Elias felt his heart swell with a love so fierce it almost frightened him. He would do anything for this child. He had already given up everything. When the hostess led Alexandra and Henry toward the VIP section, Henry planted his feet and refused to move. His mother looked down at him with an expression that had made corporate lawyers stammer and seasoned executives sweat. But Henry did not flinch. He simply pointed toward the corner table where Elias was now wiping tomato sauce from Audrey's chin with a paper napkin, his movements gentle and unhurried. "I want to sit there," Henry said again. "Near them." Alexandra's first instinct was to override him. She had not built an empire by indulging childish whims, but something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the way Henry's voice trembled slightly, as if he was asking for something he desperately needed but did not expect to receive. Perhaps it was the memory buried deep beneath years of armor of her own childhood of sitting alone at elaborate dinner tables while her parents attended to more important matters. She made a decision that surprised even herself. "We will sit there," she told the hostess, indicating a table adjacent to Elias and Audrey, "not the VIP section." "There," the hostess blinked in confusion. "But Ms. Voss, your reservation specifically, has changed," Alexandra said crisply. "That table. Now." The next few minutes unfolded with the awkward choreography of strangers forced into unexpected proximity. Alexandra sat with her back straight and her tablet already out, scanning financial reports while Henry picked at his food. Elias kept his eyes on his daughter, pretending not to notice the billionaire CEO sitting 3 feet away, pretending not to feel the weight of judgment that seemed to radiate from the other diners who glanced between them with undisguised curiosity. But children have never cared about social boundaries. Audrey noticed Henry first. She noticed the way he sat so still, the way his eyes kept drifting toward her and her father, the way he seemed to be holding his breath as if afraid to disturb the air around him. She recognized that look. She had seen it in the mirror after her mother died in those terrible months when the world had felt too big and too empty and too frightening to navigate alone. She leaned toward him. "Hi, I am Audrey. Your coat looks really cool." Henry startled like a deer caught in headlights. He glanced at his mother, who was frowning at something on her screen, then back at Audrey. "I am Henry," he said quietly. "Is that your mom?" Audrey asked, pointing toward Alexandra. Henry nodded. "She looks important. My daddy is important too. He can fix anything." Audrey beamed with pride. "Once our toaster exploded and he made it work again with just a screwdriver and some tape." Despite himself, Henry smiled. "That is pretty cool." The exchange might have continued, two children finding common ground across an invisible divide if not for the arrival of Vivian Harding. Vivian was a society matron of the old school, the kind of woman who measured worth in bloodlines and bank balances. She swept up to Alexandra's table with the predatory grace of a shark scenting blood in the water. "Alexandra, darling," she cooed, her voice carrying just enough to reach the surrounding tables. "I did not expect to see you slumming it in the general section, and who is your charming neighbor?" She glanced at Elias with an expression that made clear exactly what she thought of his worn jacket and calloused hands. Alexandra opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, something happened that would change everything. Audrey stood up from her chair. She was small enough that she had to crane her neck to look Vivian in the eye, but her voice was steady and clear. "My daddy works 2 jobs. He wakes up before the sun comes up, and he does not go to sleep until he has made sure I have done my homework and brushed my teeth. He is the hardest working person I know, and he brought me here because I got good grades and he wanted to celebrate with me." The restaurant fell silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone was staring at the 7-year-old girl who had just dressed down a woman who could buy and sell small countries. Vivian's face reddened. She looked to Alexandra for support for the cutting remark that would put this impertinent child in her place. But Alexandra was not looking at Vivian. She was looking at Henry. Her son had risen from his chair. He was standing beside Audrey, his small hand finding hers, his voice surprisingly strong as he spoke. Mr. Hayes helped his daughter with her homework. He cuts her food so she does not choke. He pays attention to her. Henry's eyes met his mother's, and in them was a challenge, a question, an accusation. Most rich people do not even see their kids. The silence stretched for an eternity. Alexandra felt something shift in her chest, something that might have been shame if she had allowed herself to feel such things. She thought of all the dinners she had missed, all the bedtimes she had delegated to nannies, all the times Henry had looked at her with those same eyes asking for something she had not known how to give. She rose from her seat with the cold precision that had made her famous. But when she spoke, her words were directed not at her son or at the embarrassed socialite, but at the waiter who had been hovering nervously nearby. "Whatever this family orders," she said, indicating Elias and Audrey, "goes on my bill. And you will treat them with the same respect you would show any guest in this establishment. Is that clear?" The waiter nodded quickly. "Yes, Miss Voss." "Of course, Miss Voss." Alexandra sat back down. She closed her tablet. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she looked at her son. Really looked at him. "Tell me about your day," she said. The evening might have ended there with that small victory, that tiny crack in Alexandra's armor. But the universe had other plans. 20 minutes later, Amanda Price burst through the restaurant's front doors with the controlled panic of someone delivering very bad news. Amanda was Alexandra's executive assistant, a woman who had survived 5 years in the pressure cooker of Voss Capital through a combination of unflappable competence and strategic caffeine consumption. She had never in all that time interrupted one of Alexandra's scheduled appearances. But tonight was different. Tonight everything was falling apart. She leaned close to Alexandra's ear, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clinton Sterling has called an emergency board meeting. He has the votes. He is moving to invoke the fitness clause." Alexandra's face remained perfectly composed, but beneath the table, her hands had begun to tremble. Clinton Sterling was everything she despised a silver-tongued manipulator who had been circling her position for years waiting for any sign of weakness. The fitness clause was a nuclear option, a provision that allowed the board to remove a CEO deemed unfit to lead. It had never been used in the company's history. "On what grounds?" Alexandra asked, her voice steady. Amanda hesitated. "Someone leaked footage of your hospital visit last month. The stress episode. They are framing it as a mental health crisis. Clinton is arguing that you are a liability to shareholders." The words hit Alexandra like physical blows. She had kept that hospital visit secret, had paid considerable sums to ensure her momentary breakdown remained private. But somehow, someone had found out. Someone had weaponized her one moment of vulnerability. She stood up too quickly. The room tilted. Her vision blurred at the edges. She had not eaten properly in days, had been running on coffee, and adrenaline, had been pushing herself past every reasonable limit because that was what success demanded. And now, in the worst possible moment, her body was betraying her. Elias saw it happen before anyone else did. He saw the way Alexandra swayed, the way the color drained from her face, the way her eyes lost focus. He had seen that look before in emergency rooms and on battlefields in the moments before the body surrendered to forces beyond its control. He was moving before he made the conscious decision to act. He caught Alexandra before she could fall, easing her into a chair with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times. His hands moved automatically, checking her pulse, tilting her head back slightly to ensure clear airways, loosening the collar of her silk blouse. "Get me orange juice," he told the nearest waiter. "And something with sugar. A cookie, candy, anything. Now." The waiter scrambled to comply. Around them, the restaurant had erupted into chaos. Several people had their phones out recording. Others whispered behind their hands. But Elias ignored all of it. His focus was entirely on the woman before him. "When did you last eat?" he asked Alexandra, his voice calm and steady. She blinked at him, confused. This morning." "Maybe." "There was a meeting. That was 12 hours ago. Your blood sugar has crashed. You need to eat something right now." The waiter returned with a glass of orange juice and a small plate of cookies. Elias guided the glass to Alexandra's lips, making her take small sips. The sugar hit her bloodstream almost immediately, and the world began to stabilize. "Keep breathing," Elias said. "Slow and steady. You are going to be fine." And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. Amanda arranged for them to move to a private room in the back of the restaurant, away from the cameras and the whispers. It was a strange assembly that gathered there: the billionaire CEO who had just nearly collapsed, the working-class single father who had saved her, and two children who seemed to understand more about what was happening than any of the adults. Alexandra sat on a velvet settee, still pale, but regaining her composure. Henry had not left her side since the incident, his small hand wrapped around hers in a grip that she found surprisingly comforting. Across from them, Elias sat with Audrey, his expression thoughtful as Amanda laid out the full scope of the crisis. "The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Amanda explained. "Clinton has been preparing this for months. He has affidavits from the hospital staff. He has a media strategy ready to go. By noon tomorrow, every financial news outlet will be running stories about your mental breakdown." It was not a breakdown, Alexandra said through gritted teeth. It was exhaustion. Stress. "I was back at work the next day. That does not matter. Perception is reality in this game, and Clinton controls the narrative right now." Elias had been listening quietly, his mind working through the problem with the same analytical precision he had once applied to trauma cases. Something about this situation did not add up. "How did he get the hospital records?" Elias asked. "HIPAA violations carry serious penalties. Someone took a significant risk to leak that information." Amanda shook her head. "We do not know. Our legal team is investigating, but—" "And the timing?" Elias continued. "This dinner tonight, it was supposed to be a photo opportunity, right? Showing Ms. Voss as a loving mother. Who knew about it?" Amanda's eyes widened slightly. "The PR team. Several board members who were invited to join but declined. And Clinton. He was on the original guest list. But he did not come," Elias said slowly. "Instead, he waited until you were in public, surrounded by cameras, and then delivered news designed to cause maximum stress. He was trying to trigger exactly what almost happened out there. He wanted footage of you collapsing." Alexandra stared at him. This stranger in his worn jacket had just articulated what she had been too close to see herself. She had been set up. Clinton had not just been waiting for her to show weakness. He had been engineering it. Audrey had fallen asleep on a pile of cushions in the corner, and Henry had curled up beside her, the two children finding comfort in each other's presence. In the quiet that followed, Alexandra found herself studying Elias with new eyes. "How did you know what to do?" she asked. When I almost fainted." Elias smiled slightly. "I have some experience with medical emergencies. You are not just a handyman, are you?" The question hung in the air. Elias was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to his sleeping daughter. "I was a trauma surgeon," he said finally. "Military first, then civilian. I worked in emergency rooms for 15 years. I was good at it. I saved a lot of lives." Alexandra's eyebrows rose. "What happened?" Elias's voice grew heavy. "My wife. She needed surgery. A routine procedure, or so they said. I was overseas on a medical mission when complications developed. By the time I got back—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Alexandra understood without needing to hear more. "You blame yourself. I save strangers every day. I could not save her. After that, I could not walk into a hospital anymore. Could not put on scrubs. Could not look at a scalpel without seeing her face." Elias exhaled slowly. "So I became someone else. Someone who fixes broken machines instead of broken people. It pays less, but I can be there for Audrey every morning and every night. That is worth more than any salary." The confession settled between them like something precious and fragile. Alexandra realized she was seeing this man clearly for the first time, not as a curiosity or a charity case, but as someone who had faced impossible choices and chosen love over ambition. It was the opposite of everything she had done, and she did not know whether to admire him or envy him. The moment shattered when Henry began to cry. It started quietly, a small hitch in his breathing that Alexandra almost missed. But then his shoulders began to shake and his breath came faster and faster, and suddenly he was gasping, his face contorted with terror. "Mom," he choked out. "Are they going to take you away? Are the bad people going to make you go?" Alexandra rushed to his side, but she did not know what to do. She had never seen her son like this. She had never been present for the nightmares, the anxieties, the fears that children carry in the dark. Those had always been handled by nannies, by therapists, by anyone but her. "Henry, sweetheart, calm down. I am fine. Everything is fine." But her words only seemed to make it worse. Henry was spiraling, lost in a panic that no logical reassurance could reach. Elias moved to kneel beside the boy. He did not touch him, did not crowd him, just positioned himself at eye level and began to speak in a low, steady voice. "Hey, Henry. I need you to do something for me. Can you look around this room and tell me 5 things you can see?" Henry's wild eyes focused on Elias. I see a lamp." "Good. What else?" A painting. With flowers." "Excellent. Keep going." Slowly, painfully, Henry worked through the exercise. 5 things he could see, 4 things he could touch, 3 things he could hear. His breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. The terror receded like a tide pulling back from the shore. When it was over, Henry did something that broke Alexandra's heart. He leaned into Elias, wrapping his small arms around the man's neck, and whispered, "You make it quiet in my head, Mr. Elias." Alexandra watched her son seek comfort from a stranger and felt the last walls around her heart begin to crumble. She did not know why she invited them home. It was impulsive, irrational, completely unlike her. But the words left her mouth before she could stop them. "Come to my house. Please. Henry needs... I need..." She could not finish the sentence. But Elias seemed to understand anyway. The Voss mansion was everything Elias had expected, and nothing like what he imagined. It was enormous, modern, filled with art that cost more than he would earn in a lifetime. But it was also cold. Empty. The kind of place designed to impress rather than to comfort. There were no family photos on the walls, no evidence that a child lived here at all. Henry's room was the saddest thing Elias had ever seen. It was immaculate, organized with military precision, filled with expensive toys that looked like they had never been touched. There were no crayon drawings taped to the walls, no half-finished projects scattered on the floor, no evidence of the beautiful chaos that came with a childhood fully lived. But Audrey saw only possibility. She grabbed Henry's hand and pulled him toward the shelves of pristine toys. "Let us build a fort." She began pulling down blankets and pillows, constructing an elaborate structure in the middle of the room. Henry hesitated, looking toward his mother as if asking permission to make a mess. "Go ahead," Alexandra said softly. "Have fun." The transformation was immediate. Within minutes, the immaculate room had become a battlefield of imagination. Henry was laughing, actually laughing, as he and Audrey defended their pillow fortress from invisible invaders. Alexandra stood in the doorway, watching, and felt something she had not experienced in years: hope. Downstairs, Elias had found his way to the kitchen. It was a chef's dream, equipped with every possible gadget and appliance, but the refrigerator told a different story. Prepackaged meals, protein shakes, nothing that looked like it had been cooked with love or eaten together as a family. He began pulling ingredients from the shelves, working with the ease of long practice. When Alexandra found him 20 minutes later, he had scrambled eggs cooking on the stove and hot chocolate warming in a pot. "You did not have to do this," she said. "Kids need real food, and so do you." He handed her a mug. When did you last have a home-cooked meal? Alexandra could not remember. They talked while Elias cooked, really talked in a way that Alexandra had not done with anyone in years. She told him about her childhood, about parents who measured love in achievements and approval in report cards. He told her about Audrey's first steps, about the way his daughter still said goodnight to her mother's photograph every evening. "You have something I never understood," Alexandra admitted. "You chose presence over success. You chose time with your daughter over everything else. Elias considered this. You have financial capital. I have time capital. Neither of us is wrong. But maybe we are both incomplete. He looked at her steadily. Your son is starving Alexandra. Not for food, for you, for your attention, for the feeling that he matters more than any board meeting or quarterly report. The words should have stung, but coming from Elias, they felt like medicine rather than poison. The next morning arrived with the inevitability of a reckoning. Alexandra dressed in her sharpest suit, her armor restored her game face firmly in place. But something was different. She was not going into battle alone. The Voss Capital boardroom was a theater of power, all glass and chrome and carefully positioned lighting designed to intimidate. Clinton Sterling sat at the far end of the table, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his smile oozing false concern. Around him were the shareholders he had spent months cultivating whispering poison about Alexandra's fitness to lead, but he had not expected her to bring reinforcements. When Elias walked in behind Alexandra, still wearing his simple button-down shirt, Clinton's smile flickered. When Amanda began setting up a presentation, he shifted uncomfortably. And when Alexandra took her seat with perfect calm, he knew that something had gone very wrong with his carefully orchestrated coup. Before we proceed with this farce, Alexandra said I would like to introduce someone. This is Dr. Elias Hayes. He was present during the incident Mr. Sterling is attempting to weaponize against me, and he has some relevant expertise that the board should hear. Elias stood, and despite his humble clothes, there was an authority in his bearing that made even the wealthiest shareholders pay attention. He explained what had happened at the restaurant in clinical detail. A hypoglycemic episode brought on by extreme stress and inadequate nutrition. Fully recoverable. No indication of mental instability or unfitness to lead. He displayed images from the video Clinton had circulated pointing out the signs that any trained medical professional would recognize. But more importantly, he raised questions. This video was taken on private premises, Elias said. It was leaked within hours of Ms. Voss's hospitalization last month. The timing of both incidents combined with the simultaneous arrival of press photographers suggests coordination. Amanda took over displaying a series of emails that traced the leak back to Clinton's office. The board members shifted in their seats, their expressions hardening as they realized they had been manipulated. Clinton Sterling had orchestrated a campaign designed to exploit a mother having dinner with her son. He had weaponized her humanity against her. This is preposterous, Clinton sputtered. These allegations are documented, Alexandra interrupted. Thoroughly documented, and I believe the board will find the evidence compelling. The vote that followed was swift and brutal. Clinton was removed from his position pending a full investigation. Alexandra retained her seat, but with a condition that she herself proposed. Voss Capital would implement new policies supporting employee mental health and work-life balance. The Ice Queen was melting, and she was doing it on her own terms. Afterward, in the empty hallway outside the boardroom, Alexandra found Elias waiting for her. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the dust motes that danced in the air between them. "Thank you," she said. "You did not have to do any of this." "Yes, I did," Elias replied. Henry was watching. He needed to know that his mother was strong, that she fights for what matters. Is that the only reason? The question surprised them both. Elias took a moment before answering. "No," he admitted. "It is not the only reason." They stood there suspended in a moment that felt like the hinge of something larger. Then running footsteps shattered the silence. Henry and Audrey came racing down the hallway, freed from the care of the temporary nanny, their faces bright with excitement. "Mom," Henry crashed into Alexandra's legs. "Did you win? Did you beat the bad guys?" Alexandra knelt down to his level. Something she realized she had rarely done before. "We won, sweetheart. Together." Audrey tugged at Elias's sleeve. "Daddy, can we have dinner together again? All of us. Henry says his mom's kitchen is really big, and we could make pizza." Elias looked at Alexandra, a question in his eyes. She answered it without hesitation. "I would like that," she said. very much. 3 months later, the Voss kitchen had been transformed. Flour dusted every surface. Tomato sauce had somehow ended up on the ceiling. 2 children stood on stools at the counter arguing passionately about the proper ratio of cheese to pepperoni. And 2 adults worked side by side, their movements easy with the comfort of growing familiarity. Alexandra had learned to make pasta from scratch. It was terrible, lumpy, and misshapen, but Henry ate every bite as if it were a gourmet masterpiece. Elias had started consulting for Voss Capital's new employee wellness program, but he still made sure to clock out every day by 5. Audrey and Henry had become inseparable siblings in everything but blood, united by their shared understanding of what it meant to need more than money could buy. The business press had noticed the changes. Articles appeared about the new Alexandra Voss, the CEO who had somehow become more effective while working fewer hours. Her company's stock had risen steadily since the implementation of her family-friendly policies. Talent was flooding in, drawn by the reputation of a workplace that valued humans as more than productivity units. But the real changes could not be measured in quarterly reports. On this particular evening, with rain streaming down the windows and dinner long finished, the 4 of them had collapsed on the living room couch. Henry was teaching Audrey a card game. Alexandra had her head on Elias's shoulder, her tablet forgotten on the coffee table. For the first time in her life, she had nowhere else she needed to be. "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked quietly. Alexandra considered the question. She thought about the woman she had been 3 months ago, armored and alone, so focused on building an empire that she had failed to notice her son slipping away from her. She thought about a cold winter night, a restaurant full of strangers, and a tired man in a worn jacket who had somehow seen past all her defenses. "I was thinking about that first dinner," she said. "You were just a stranger in a worn shirt trying to give your daughter one special night. And I was so busy performing that I almost missed everything that mattered." Elias pulled her closer. "And now I cannot imagine my life without you, either of you." Across the room, Henry looked up from his card game. He did not say anything, but his smile said everything. For 6 years he had watched his mother from a distance, loving her and longing for her in equal measure. Now she was here, really here, present in a way that had nothing to do with schedules or obligations. Later that night, after the children had been tucked into bed in adjoining rooms, Alexandra and Elias stood on the penthouse balcony. The city glittered below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, all of them carrying their own burdens and hopes and hidden hungers. Elias took her hand. "I used to think my life ended when I left medicine. When I lost Sarah, when I walked away from everything I had built, I thought that was it. I thought I would spend the rest of my days just surviving, just making sure Audrey had enough." And now, Alexandra asked, "Now I know that endings are sometimes beginnings in disguise. I was waiting for you and Henry. I just did not know it yet." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Tomorrow there would be meetings and deadlines and the endless demands of their respective worlds. But tonight, there was only this. 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds. 2 children who had taught their parents how to love. A family that had been formed not by blood or obligation, but by choice. 1 dinner. 1 small act of kindness. 1 moment of letting the walls come down. That was all it had taken to change everything.